Welcome to the channel. If you haven't been here, we are a fact-based channel. Everything we look at is through the eyes of an FBI agent. We cuss and discuss so many crimes, but specifically, the Idaho 4 case has been at the forefront of what we have looked at ever since those kids were viciously murdered back in November 2022. Here we are coming up on 3 years later, and finally the slow wheels of justice are turning. But I wanted to bring up also what's happening tomorrow to remind you all that the Menendez brothers are set to be resentenced. That is going to be a 2-day-long slated resentencing. And despite the prosecution seeking a continuance, it wasn't allowed. They are going forward with that resentencing. I think this is a really big case. I think it's very important. I'm going to do a special live on that, so I won't waste too much time, but I wanted to remind you all, 9:30 Pacific time, that is when that is going to be going to resentencing. So to keep an eye on that, I think is really important. But let's get into Diddy really quick before I go into our main focus today. The Diddy case, they have gotten their jury. Remember, this is a huge RICO case involving absolutely grotesque human trafficking, sexual assaults, even an arson. The RICO encompasses years, really 2 decades of crimes that they are accusing Diddy and others of committing. So, and when I say others that were complicit in these crimes, there are so many individuals involved in this that will be testifying. This would be likely the highlight of the true crime community, but because of the Karen Reed trial, I think so many people are diverted onto that case and away from Diddy's case. But it is going forward. Expect Cassie Ventura to be the state's top witness. The video where she's being drugged in that hotel, it's horrific to watch, beaten, kicked, that has been allowed to be admitted. All the search warrant information from both Miami and from Los Angeles, from his homes there, all of that's coming in. But the prosecution took a big setback when victim 3, who's one of their main victims that they wanted to highlight, is AWOL. We don't know whether something horrific has happened to her, whether she's paid off, whether she just got scared and said, I am not going through with this. We just don't know, but we know she's gone. And that's really concerning for the prosecution. I hope they're able to keep all the rest of their witnesses intact, because if people stop, affording themselves to be able to testify, this is going to be a pretty short trial. So that's going on. I just wanted to touch base on those. We'll do special segments on those. Back to Idaho. In terms of Idaho, this is where we're at. What has been happening in the last week and a half or so, right? We're kind of back to the beginning where we're seeing everything sealed, documents are sealed, and we don't know what's going on in these hearings. Well, these hearings are specifically about, I believe, what is going to be allowed in. Let me add this to the stage. What is going to be allowed in terms of, if Bryan Kohberger is convicted, what mitigating witnesses, testimony, evidence, information is going to be allowed to try to preclude, if again he's convicted, Bryan Kohberger, if again he is sentenced and they try to sentence him to death, what is the defense going to be able to offer? I want to quickly digress and say, for those of you who don't know about the Idaho 4 case, this case is specifically about 4, I'm going to call them kids. They weren't out on their own. They were in college, enjoying life. Maddie, Xana, Ethan, and Kaylee, beautiful young kids in Moscow, Idaho, attending the university there, who were viciously killed as in the wee hours of the morning, between about 4:07 a.m. and about 4:20 a.m. viciously murdered in their home as they slept and or were in their bedrooms getting ready to sleep. Xana actually wasn't asleep, and we're going to go into some of those details again just to refresh. But essentially, they were murdered. It took 5 weeks for the FBI, who had assigned 60 agents and local and state officers, to bring evidence against Brian Koberger. Brian Koberger was a PhD student studying at Washington State University, just 10 minutes away in Pullman, Washington. And he was arrested ultimately at his parents' home in Albright, Pennsylvania. So that's where we're at. That's the quick thumbnail. But what is going on with all these closed door sessions? Again, I believe it is all about who is going to be able to testify, and it's all related to medical information. Now, specifically, very recently, we've touched on this before, the defense is saying, listen, Brian Koberger is autistic. He has, issues with being obsessive compulsive disorders. And for this reason, that should mitigate the thought of sort of sentencing him to death. I say malarkey. This has all just come up. I also say malarkey, even if they are going to diagnose him with any of these situations. If you have autism, if you have a compulsive disorder, that shouldn't leave you off the hook for any punishment that somebody that doesn't have those disorders would otherwise receive. And it's interesting because I've heard from so many people who have autism or are on the spectrum in some capacity with autism, and they're incensed about this. They know right from wrong, very high functioning, many are, and to say that because you have autism or you have a compulsive disorder that you shouldn't be eligible for a particular punishment, I think is pretty ridiculous, but that's what they're putting forward, and that's what is going on now with that. Let's get, though, to the Dateline program. The Dateline program released a lot of information that we already knew. Let me get another photo up here. That we already knew. Certainly they needed to do that to sort of recap the case for everybody. A lot of people who watch Dateline enjoy crime programs, but they turn it on Friday nights and they're not entrenched in true crime like all of you out there. And so they had to recap really a lot of the factual information that was already out there. But they also showed us some information that I thought was very new and interesting. And I thought it was very important we touch on it. I've had so many people contact me. Jennifer, was it real? What they said, was that true in Dateline? Can we believe it? Is it trustworthy? One, I've worked with Dateline before, and I can tell you they are impeccable at their fact checking. They really are. They want to look and make sure everything that anybody on their program says, they double and triple fact check that. And if somebody is on there being interviewed, because it's literally you sit there and you're interviewed. I was lucky to be interviewed by Keith, an amazing person. You talk to him for hours, and then they clip out and maybe, use maybe a total of 20 seconds here, 20 seconds here of what you have to say, right? But they're looking through everything you say, and they make sure that what makes their show is accurate. And so I very much trust that what they have to say on these programs, particularly on Dateline, has been fact checked, and they believe it to be true. Okay, number one. Number two, they have a lot of information that they presented was specifically source information. Well, Jennifer, sources can say anything, right? That source close to the investigation, source, that knows, so source that is on the inner workings of the investigation, right? And a lot of people don't want to really buy into source information, but I can tell you, as an FBI agent, sources you're graded basically on three things. You're evaluated to see what your grade is. Are you going to be, just mediocre, outstanding, excellent? What's your evaluation going to be? Because depending on your evaluation, you can get bonuses, you can get promotions. It's just a good thing to be rated super high, right? And source information is a huge part of that. 3 good sources that are providing valuable information that can be corroborated, that help you put bad guys in jail. That's what they're kind of looking at. It's the same thing with Dateline, News Nation. People have amazing sources. They've been in this industry forever, many of them. If you look at somebody like Ashley Banfield or Chris Cuomo, oh my gosh, they've been around forever, and they've made connections, and they have sources. And a lot of people come to them with information because they want it to be known to the public, either how strong a case is or an issue there might be with a case. So what I'm trying to say is many sources are very reliable that these news networks have. Now let's get dialed down even closer with Dateline. Remember their program a year and a half ago now or so that they first did, called 1122 King Road. They broke the fact that a K-bar knife and sheath were purchased by Brian Koberger. Does everybody remember that? That's how we heard about it. That's how I heard about it, because of Dateline's source. Dateline's source was dead on numerous other items too, that being the main one, but there were several others. So I know news media has great sources. I know Dateline is reputable. And finally, I know they have a good source on this case. So having put that all together, yes, I believe the information that Dateline put forth is reliable and is likely from, I don't know who it is, but I don't think it's an FBI agent, because you just have too much to lose. You lose your job leaking information to the media. It's something no one ever does. If they do, they're just asking to lose their job, and they have really, it's a good job and it's hard to get. I think it's probably somebody in the local or state element that's releasing some of that, but we'll never know because they will be protected. Any information provided, they would go, meaning the journalist would go to jail before they would give up their sources. And that's what makes them good journalists. We saw some recent rulings in the Karen Reed case where journalists were not forced to give up some of their things, like their notes and other confidential information. So it's something that the courts have been, in some cases, very supportive of. I don't think we'll ever find out who the source is, but I don't need to know the source. I need to know that the information I discussed that is from that program, I believe in, and I do believe in it. I would first want to talk about what really, I think, bothered me most. And this really bothered me. Where is my photo I want? I'll pull up this one. Ethan Chapin, he is one, people don't talk a lot about him. I'm going to do some more on him. Early on in the case, I would post about all of them, very specifics about a lot of details about their lives, about their what their families are doing now, his tulip garden. I bought his sweatshirt, which is really cool, by the way. I highly recommend everybody get this sweatshirt. It is one of the, I think it was $60. It's one of the highest quality, warmest, cuddliest. I got his favorite color, I guess, was this turquoise blue color. And it's amazing, but they use that for scholarship money. And what I love about Ethan Chapin's fund, which is kind of different than some of the others, what the others are doing. His mom told me, she said, listen, Ethan wasn't, he was in school for the whole purpose of it, right? He's going to school, he's getting a degree, but he had a lot of fun. So she said, make no mistake, we want to, sorry, I'm trying to get the right lighting. We want to give back and want to support a student who was like Ethan, somebody that Ethan would want that money to go to. And so their scholarship fund isn't necessarily based on academic prowess. It's more based on who the student is overall. What are they doing? Are they getting the overall kind of experience being in college? And I just loved that when she said that. because of course so many get academic scholarships or, scholarships because you're a good debater or good this. What about for those that listen, they graduate with B's and C's and they have a great time doing it and everybody loves them and they're the life of the party? That's kind of the impression I have of Ethan Chapin after speaking with his mom. But I want to talk about what came out in that special about Ethan that years ago, meaning right after this, in reporting heavily on this, and really when this was almost the only thing I reported on the Idaho case, I had heard about a mutilation. And I did not have the particular details about it, about what was done. And now I think we have those details. And the words were used. He was carved. His legs were carved. And I had people ask me today, well, does that mean that, whoever did this, of course, I think the evidence is leaning toward that it's Bryan Kohberger. Certainly probable cause is there. And when we look at the totality of the evidence, I feel confident saying that is, factually speaking, it would appear that Bryan Kohberger committed this crime. He's cloaked in innocence in a court of law, but that doesn't mean factually he's cloaked in innocence. And his legs were carved up, and many people said, well, does that mean he just wanted to make sure he didn't chase him down or otherwise? No. I believe based on what we know, what was said in that special and what was said early on by the coroner, his throat was cut, an artery was cut, carotid artery, and he was, you would bleed out and be dead just like that. And so why the mutilation of the legs? Actually, Dr. Gary Bricata talked about it, about the loathing and really hate and just disgust that you would have with what you would see with a rival. In other words, Ethan Chapin was all Bryan Kohberger wasn't and could never be. Never could get the girl. Never was the popular one. Never was socially accepted. He wasn't Ethan Chapin. And Ethan Chapin stood for what he needed revenge on. And anyway, I'm expanding on what Dr. Bricata said, but certainly he brought home the fact that this was an angry, evil action toward Ethan Chapin that didn't need to happen. And quite frankly, from what we know now, Ethan didn't even need to be killed. From all accounts, Ethan was passed out. He was exhausted. He'd been up all day, partying all night, got home at 2, even at 4 in the morning. Xana was still up. And, but he was sound asleep. And Xana had already been killed. So why walk in there and kill Ethan and then mutilate his legs? And then afterwards, according to the special, sit down. Of course, he sat down, Bryan Kohberger, because exhausted, need to think, need to collect myself. His whole plan was thrown off. In that special, they talk about the order in which everybody was killed, which is the exact order we've said from word one. He went up the stairs. He was seeking Maddie. I've talked about that ad nauseum, that it was Maddie Mogan, because that was who he sought. That was the kind of profile of someone. Thin. Remember, Bryan Kohberger lost over 100 pounds. We've known that for a long time. I was fortunate enough to do that paper with Mr. Volch. He's an amazing writer, and a lot of background and information came forward when we were researching that paper. And so we knew he had lost over 100 pounds. I believe, if I recall correctly, and it's in that paper, which is on my Twitter that we wrote, also featured in People magazine, 130 pounds, if I recall correctly. That's a lot of weight to lose. Trying to really become the butterfly, I think, is what he was trying to achieve, to really reinvent himself. by that weight loss. And it's difficult to go through life 100 pounds overweight. And that's what he had done. That always told me about him, that he was an individual that when he put his mind to something, he could do it. That nothing was going to stand in his way. Listen, I try to lose 5 pounds and I'm like, oh my God, I just can't, it's so hard. You know, less snacking, eating more healthy, right? He lost over 100 pounds, and he didn't just lose it in a binge or with Ozemka or whatever I think that's called. He lost it the right way. He kept it, and not saying anything bad about Ozemka. I'm just saying he had no help like that. He did it and he kept it off for years. And I think that just says a lot about a person's constitution. And I always said anybody who could commit crime like that, his constitution was strong. Nothing was going to get in his way. Not a few roommates, not some doors to go through, not the risk. He's willing to take that risk to conquer Maddie Mogen. I think this was completely sexually enticed, completely. There's no doubt about it. His plans for Maddie Mogen were botched when Kaylee Gonsalves was there. And, murders Maddie, gets in a struggle, murders Kaylee. In that struggle, the knife sheath that he did not secure correctly, which means he should have had it intertwined with a belt loop, which I think he either had it, if he had those coveralls on, he had it in one of those cargo pockets or in the side pocket. And in that struggle, it fell out. Believe me, if Bryan Kohberger could change one thing, he would change losing that knife sheath. That knife sheath is possibly the only reason they have Bryan Kohberger right now. So in any event, then Xana is awoken by the noise, goes upstairs, and Bryan Kohberger, his attention is drawn to her, chases her down those stairs and stabs her to death, and then goes over and kills Ethan Chapin, as we previously described. So I think for me, as I said, the carving of Ethan really was one of those things that really hit home with me about that special. They didn't spend a lot of time on it, but for me, it was something that I had known about a mutilation for 2 years now, going on 3 years. And now we see where that rumor had some legs. I always say, and I remember exactly where that rumor was, and it was from someone whose daughter had told them different details about the crime. And we always said this in the FBI. And one of my last questions, anytime I interviewed anybody, was, have you heard any rumors about the case? Have you heard any rumors about the person? And I tell you, you get some of the best nuggets. It's never spot on, but there's always a nugget of truth that would help lead you to the truth, because rumors always have just a seed of truth. And sometimes that seed, like I said, in this case, we found out the seed and the mutilation meant the carving of Ethan Chapin. I want to talk about a couple of other things for the first time, and perhaps not, because we've all seen the Linda Lane footage. We've seen a lot of footage of his car. But in this particular Dateline special, we saw it, what I call 5x5, loud and clear, Lima Charlie. We see the car that is identifiable as this white sedan. People who know vehicles would identify that as the Hyundai Elantra. And wow, you saw it just crystal clear. I actually had written down some of these times that I wanted to go through. Essentially, 326, 330, 333, 338, 340, 356, 358, 4 o'clock, and then 406 to 407, then finally 407 at King. Listen, that's a lot of times to be there in that area going by. So this situation was definitely showed us hardcore evidence of the car and the car going by so many times leading up to the crime. Discussed on Dateline by Dr. Bucata was why. Why did that happen? And the other FBI profiler discussed it as well, also. And essentially, what we all know with people who conduct these types of cases or crimes, especially somebody that it's their first crime, which I believe this was Brian Koberger's first crime. It wasn't supposed to be 4 people mutilated. It was supposed to be Maddie Mogen, and then I believe SA against Maddie Mogen. That was what he thought he could have happen. But it didn't happen that way because of circumstances. But I think it was, okay, this is my moment. Why did he pick that day and time? I think that is a part of his impulsive behavior. Now, I've said that before, and some people will say, oh, Jennifer, he's not impulsive. He's not impulsive because if you look, he planned this out well. And I 100% agree with you. But what was the impulse that made him pick the 13th, that made him pick this particular day and time? I say it was his impulse finally got him, finally the courage. And he talks about that actually in one of the papers he wrote. If you look back at the crime scene paper that he wrote, we went into it on a live. So if you want to just look back into it there, I go over it in detail. Or if you want to read about it, it's on my Twitter, and you can probably find it, I'm sure, in a lot of other places. But specifically, he talks about that, the impulsive nature of a stabber. Basically, he's talking about a crime scene involving a stabbing of all things. So anyway, we get a real insight as to Brian Kober. I think his impulsivity at this point, is that a word? His impulsiveness at this point, and finally getting enough courage to do it. Couple of other things that came out, maybe more than a couple, we're going to discuss. We're going to discuss the Ted Bundy, the searches he did. All of us wanted to know about the searches. We knew that they had all of his computers, that his phone, his media. Yes, I think some of it was scrubbed. They actually talk about it, that he was getting ready to scrub some of the information on the computers of different searches. But, the bottom line is, as I was taught in a recent seminar I went to, exactly about this, what can you scrub from somebody's computer? You can't scrub much. The people who know how to get it, and they went through the whole thing and all these databases they use and how they do it. And you just can't hide. You can't hide from the keystrokes. You can't hide from what you do on the computer. And they have the best of the best that are reviewing all of this on the FBI side of things. So you can run, but you can't hide from all of that. And they know he searched things like Ted Bundy and a paper written on Ted Bundy. And certainly then after that, you see Brian Koberger posed in these pictures. Oh, I should have had one. I don't have one on the ready, but posed in these pictures with the black hood. I posted it on my Twitter, dressed like Ted Bundy. I mean, Bundy is famous for that. Just go on Amazon and look at Ted Bundy sweatshirts. You can buy them. There's dozens of them. It's really sick that people profit off of this. But you can see the famous Ted Bundy black sweatshirt that Brian Koberger dressed like, really right before he was arrested. It's really spooky taking these selfies. I posted one that I'm sure many of you have seen on the different platforms. So that's very interesting because I've said it all along. I said it from the beginning. I'm sticking with it. When you look at facts and you look at evidence and it leads you somewhere, unless there's new facts or information to lead you away from your conclusions based on solid evidence, that's where you stay. And I've always said this was a fledgling serial killer in the making. No one commits the crime he committed in the way he did it with his background that wasn't ready to do it again. And we know that he made additional Amazon. Well, he didn't make the purchase, but he looked it up. He put it in his cart, another K-bar knife and sheath. Why? Was he wanting it in case he got arrested to say, see, I really have it? I don't think so. I truly, truly believe he would have killed again. He was planning to kill again. And I think he idolized, looked up to Ted Bundy. Can the defense say, and could an argument be made? Well, of course he's looking up Ted Bundy. Of course he's looking up all these salacious type things. He's a PhD in criminology. And I always laugh. I said, if you looked at my search history, oh my gosh, I would look like, the biggest psychopath. All of us that are in true crime, because we're constantly delving into that, preparing for shows or people wanting to dig up information about a true crime case they care about. It's not that you can take one thing he searched for and say, this makes him a psychopathic killer. You look at the totality of everything that happened, the totality that we know about Brian Koberger, and you add into it the searches about Bundy, and it all makes sense. He also looked up college students who were sociopaths. I think when you really look back at the early days of his writings, he talks about having no empathy. He talks about how terrible he treats his father. He talks about what a terrible human he is. And, that's the true sign of somebody who is a narcissist and who becomes they hate themselves really down deep. But that isn't what you see. What you see is that grandiose, presentation of, I know everything. I'm the smartest one in the room. Nobody's going to catch me. I'm not going to get caught. I'm the man. I'm in power. And one of the things he was looking up was that sociopath. And I really think it's because he was exploring himself, saying, I think I line up with this definition. I want to post a picture really quick I posted this a long time ago. This was Brian Koberger when he was in court. This is after Anne gets a hold of him. It says, listen, we got to trim you down. We got to gel you up. We got to get rid of the caterpillar eyebrows. We have got to get you looking, suave and debonair. We cannot have you looking like that crazy person that we saw coming in to the courtroom early on, right after the arrest. And it was a landmine, or not a landmine, a landfall for the prosecution. Oh, goodness. Nope. Oh, there we go. To get this picture. Because this picture that Brian Koberger took the morning right after these murders that everybody's seen online, these murders show these huge, big eyebrows. And that's going to be important for what Dylan Mortensen has to say during her testimony. Remember, he was covered up in a mask that wasn't a ski mask. It's balaclava. And it covers everything, really, except this portion. And she saw those big eyebrows. And this is going to show that. And it's such an important picture for a lot of spooky reasons. We already did a live on it. We don't have to go back over it. But certainly from a strictly a prosecution and evidence standpoint, this is so important. By the way, those earbuds, when I did a live on that, I said, I guarantee there's a song that Brian Koberger listens to and thinks about these murders that takes him back to that moment. Just like you might have a song of the first, time you had a kiss and you had music in the background, or you danced with somebody you were in love with at the prom and you remember a special song. Well, this guy I believe, had a song he listened to relive and that he dreamed about when he would do these murders. And you notice he has those earbuds in during this. I think he's probably listening to that song. On Dateline, they talked about one of the songs, which was, oh gosh, I forgot the name of it. Does somebody in chat remember what they said? Gosh. Anyway, it'll come to me. But he played a very specific song on YouTube that they discussed on the Dateline program. And I think that that was really, really important because I think that's how he would be able to relive everything. I wanted to talk a little bit about, let me see if anybody's bringing it up. Yes, Britney Spears. It was Britney Spears' song. And what was the name of that song, though? Criminal. Thank you. I appreciate the help. Who did that? I'm going to put you up on this stage. Criminal. Thank you, Angel. And somebody else had brought that up too. Criminal by Britney. Yes. I think that's very important, right? And for the first time, we found out that information from Dateline, not that he played that during the murders, but that he was listening to that. And I think that that is important for a song that might have reminded him and that he could fall back on. I wanted to talk about the knife. You know, the K-bar knife has never been found. The bloody clothes have never been found. And again, he would have been drenched in blood. That's not to say that he couldn't have changed out, put everything in plastic, and not transferred blood to his car. Plus, remember, by the time they searched his car, it was over 5 weeks later. All of us that are pundits and are supposed to know what we're talking about because of experience we've had. In other words, you can't hide all of that. Well, unfortunately or fortunately, we never had a Brian Koberger, a PhD student that knew about transfer and Lockhardt's theory, a PhD student that planned everything out, that ordered the proper type of gear that he could, take off and possibly put in plastic and then entered his vehicle with less transference. I mean, none of us had a guy as smart as Brian Koberger, so all of us anticipated the transfer. Also, his OCD, I mean, so clean. We know he cleaned the car when he was up in Pennsylvania. Who knows how many times he cleaned that car, but he did a good job, and we know nothing, at least in terms of DNA, was found there. Was there anything else found in there? We're going to find out. I think we've really only seen the tip of the iceberg of all there is to know. Some of the other searches he did that I think are really important are the females in bikinis and, beautiful, thin, model-like, sexy females, right? Now, a lot of people would say, what college guy isn't looking at that, right? I mean, he's a normal man. He's a normal college guy. So I agree to a degree, but again, it's like when you search Bundy, when you search sociopath, when you have the pictures that really line up with the individuals you end up murdering, it all comes together like little puzzle pieces that paint a picture for us of who Brian Koberger was and who the murderer, I would argue, is. In terms of the females too, remember, some of those females that he was looking at, they had a connection with both Maddie and Kaylee, I should say. So that's also important. Everybody keeps trying to figure out how were they linked. Well, we know they were at least linked in some degree through these other people. I think there'll be more on that that comes out certainly in trial. Let's see if I missed anything else. And then I want to get to your questions. This was big too. The phone call. There was a phone call. I believe it was two. Correct me if I'm wrong up here. But I believe it was 2 phone calls that were made to his parents right after the murders, the 6:30-ish time frame, right? And one, I believe, was 30 minutes long, and the other was 50 minutes and change long. That's what I recall. wow. To me, this made total sense. This is a guy who, for years, I mean, he's 27, just all that buildup inside of him, all that, I should say, late 20s, all of this buildup inside of him, this anger, feeling that, not in control of who he could be. It all came out that night if he indeed did these murders. What a cathartic moment for him. And I can't stand this being up here any longer. We are going to put up Xana. What a cathartic moment where finally you say, I'm in control. Dr. Bricado, I loved how he said it. He said he looked in that reflection and he was somebody again. When he took that selfie. I'm somebody, not again. I'm somebody for the first time. I would argue. I'm somebody for the first time. So I could see him calling his parents. Remember, he doesn't really have any friends, doesn't have anybody he's close to. Calling his parents. And I bet you he was in the best mood. I bet you he was just elated, kind of how you would be if you had a great accomplishment you just did. Now, maybe you can't tell your parents about it, but you can share feelings of joy and feelings of elation with them. And I think that's probably what happened during those phone calls. Speculation, that's what I believe. Let's see. I want to make sure I don't miss anything. We all knew this. And the triggering event were all the problems he was having at school. The problems with him losing his TA situation, the problems he had with students. We've heard about it for a year and a half now, all those issues. And it was all coming, I think, to a big head. Was he ever even going to return? I don't know, but it was clear that, in my opinion, there's always a trigger. There's always something where you just can't take it anymore, and that pushes you over the edge, these people over the edge that commit these really heinous crimes. And I think, that was the trigger. Let's see if there was anything else I wanted to touch on. I think that's really the highlights. I really want to get into some questions. I'm just going to put these up here. I want to thank the mods, and I want to thank everybody for being here tonight. I thought this was really important to touch on and talk about. I've had so many questions coming in, so thank you all for sharing part of your evening here with us. Let me see. I'm just going to start putting a few. Why is our society so determined that everything is a conspiracy these days? Gosh, I only wish I knew. I would say it's gone on forever, from JFK to UFOs to even 9/11. I tell you, when I was in the Virgin Islands, I was with a bunch of my friends there, and the Virgin Islands culture is wonderful, but it's very different, right? It's a very free flow. It's a very, nobody's in anybody's business. It's a really down to earth culture, but I think a lot of people there, sadly, believe in conspiracies more than maybe other people. And I was with a bunch of these girls, and somehow 9/11 came up, of all things. And everybody but one other person, and there were probably 10 of us there, said 9/11 was a hoax, that the government was responsible for 9/11, shooting down the buildings. It was all, and for somebody who worked on 9/11, intimately involved. I at that time was in Dallas. Everybody knows American Airlines were the main airline affected, and that was their headquarters. It's just infuriating. And, hopefully by the end of the night, I was able to explain to them it wasn't a hoax. It really happened. But it's incredible how people don't want to use Occam's razor, which is what individuals use that are investigators. Why do we fall on that first and foremost? Because that is typically where our investigations lead. It's not, yeah, there was a sheath there, but probably what happened was he touched it when he was at Cabela's, and then somebody else bought it that just happened to live in Moscow. And that was the person that really knew somebody and loaned it to, somebody who lived there's relative, and they left it there. That's what people like to say. I just try to ignore it. If there's one that's really terrible at trying to blame Xana or Dylan or Bethany, I jump on that because it's really disgraceful. Those Bethany and Dylan will never have a life again. They will never be 100% ever again. And it infuriates me when people try to blame them. Okay, let me see. What else do we have up here? I haven't been with you guys for so long, so I want to put some of these up. Let's see. The timeline has never been confirmed by the time of death. Only the forensic download of roommates' phones. Never known a case to use this in my life. Okay, this is an interesting point. All right, this is so wonderful. It reminds me of the Murdoch case, where this timeline is so dialed in, and it's going to get even more dialed in. I still think we don't even have near all of the pieces, but it's so dialed in because of Xana, calling for Uber Eats, getting that food delivery. Now we have all the different times. I went through them earlier in the live about all the different times that Brian Koberger was there because we could see it on film. We have the recording of the Ring camera right next door where you could hear the dog bark, where you could hear things happening. We have Dylan's testimony about, the 3 different times she got up and heard noises and how that matches up with things. We have all the phone and text messages of Dylan, of Bethany, which help us with our timeline. So this timeline is going to be really locked in tight. One to touch really quick. I know I've done it before. I'll do it quickly. About people who think that Brian Koberger could not commit this crime in this window of time he's given. Oh my gosh, everyone. This is enough time to run easily for Brian Koberger close to 1.5 miles. This is, you get 2 minutes on a wrestling match. If you've ever watched one, it's ridiculous. All the, everything that can be done in 2 minutes. Boxing, 3 minutes. Watch a boxing round. You can see how much is done. And this was far easier than that because he had a K-bar knife, a killing machine. And he had at least Maddie and Ethan that were defenseless and asleep. Oh, by the way, I'm sorry. I wanted to also talk about another search he did, which I forgot about, which was his search of porn in conjunction with people who are asleep, who are drugged, or who are otherwise unconscious. I mean, wow. That's what was turning him on. It's so much like Ted Bundy. Remember, he was a necrophiliac. He wanted to have sex with the defenseless, with those that are dead and can't fight. He can do anything he wants. It's total control. Jeffrey Dahmer, the exact same way. They wanted complete control and dominance. Look at BTK. I mean, his first victim, a little 11-year-old girl, I believe she was only 11, hanging there. And his type, he did not like to physically assault per se. He'd like to masturbate on his victims. We don't know what Brian Koberger would have done, but this is all a sign of absolute and complete control and dominance. And we see him searching all of that. So for anybody who might be on the fence about whether this was sexually motivated, 100% this was sexually motivated, in my opinion. Let's see. A couple of others I'm going to put up here, if I can get them up here. The CCTV on 11/22 is the only activated by movement, not sound, so no way to know How loud for how long? Yeah, the movement was supposedly a cat, I think, across the street that caused that camera to come on. But I agree with you. But I think we're going to know so much more. We're getting these tidbits of evidence. We're going to see so much more, everyone, so much more regarding the digital forensics analysis that'll be done. Let me see what else we have. Mandy Strong. He attacked either sleeping or drunk, defenseless kids. They probably didn't have time to scream. Gonzalez said they downed on their, or drowned probably in their own blood. So cuts to the throat. Horrific. Yes. I mean, that describes a lot of it. A lot of people talk about this screaming, and when I teach class, we do actual interactions with role players. I just did one 2 weeks ago that I talked about Quantico for the day, where you're getting attacked, and whether it's with a gun or hand-to-hand combat, many people never say a word. Some freeze, some just their voices freeze. Not everyone screams, not even close to everyone. I've trained hundreds and hundreds of people, thousands of people, and not everyone screams. So I know you might think you would scream. I know I'm a screamer because I've been attacked, and I know I screamed bloody murder, but I didn't know I would scream until I was in that situation. So, Maddie didn't have a chance. Ethan didn't have a chance. Kaylee, I think, had little chance, right? Slash, cut onto Maddie, slash, cut. She didn't have a chance. And then Xana getting chased down, she didn't have a chance. Could that have been what we heard in terms of the crying or the whimpering that Dylan described? Yes. This all also happens in seconds, everyone. That's why I'm trying to say that the minutes he had is an eternity for committing a crime like this. I always say to people who come on my Twitter and say, there's no way this could happen. I say, act it out yourself. Go upstairs, take a butter knife, stab your pillow, then stab another pillow, then go downstairs, then stab the air, then stab, somebody else in bed, then sit down, then take off all your clothes. You're going to be at a couple of minutes. Had plenty of time to commit these crimes. Let's see. Anything else? I love all these chats. I think we all just want true justice for the kids. That's it. Whoever did it needs to be held accountable. I just believe there was more than one perp. I know I think it's so unfathomable unless you're, have been in law enforcement or been in these situations to see what people can accomplish. It's mind-boggling. One of the films that they showed us when we were on week 8 or so, Hell Week, which is where you take your white collar crime exam, you take your fit test, you take your shooting battery. They keep you up all night and torture you. No, not kidding. I'm just kidding. But what you do is they show you a film of somebody shot multiple times with lethal shots, but they keep going. They keep fighting. And then they show a film of an FBI agent who was shot in the arm. I believe it was an FBI agent, might have been a task force officer, shot in the arm, non-lethal, and he dies because of panic and lack of perfusion, right? Going into shock. And it's to teach us all about the will and how strong this is, no matter what's going on with this, the will to survive. And so I just bring that up because when somebody has an intent purpose to do something, this is not difficult for them to kill all these people. We have no DNA. And if you're talking about the DNA on the stair, on the railing, I did a whole live on that, and the one on the glove found by another creator. If you're talking about all of that was found so long after they did their search, and it was on the curtilage over by a trash can. I still think it was probably a trash worker's glove, possibly that fell out of a pocket or something, and then that house was full of kids. You've all seen the video footage. Kids were in there that nobody even knew, in there all the time, going in and out. And that could have been anybody's DNA. It was on the stair railing. It wasn't, a place that you wouldn't, put a hand that had a hangnail. So I don't believe anybody else is involved other than Brian Koberger in killing those kids. Let's see, is there anything else? Let me just take two more up here. The TT show stated it was in the evidence. I love Drunk Turkey. We're talking about doing a show together, which I'm really excited about, kind of a special show, actually, that we would even name something different. I was going to see if I had anything else that I wanted to put up. Having a show and doing a show together. And so I'm really excited. We're trying to think about what we would name it. I have a lot of respect for him, Daniel, because he was former law enforcement. We talk a lot about cases and crime. And I like him because he is so common sense, Occam's razor. And that appeals to my sensibilities. Let's see. Yes. So we actually, he had me on. I've done a show with him. It was amazing. We had a great time. And so we think we'd really jive well together, our different styles. Of course, I'm so different from him and he's so different from me. But when it comes to how we investigate crime and look at crime, we actually look at it very similarly through a similar lens. Let me see if there's anything. I used to think the same. How did he do it so quickly? Who knows who else or what else he has slaughtered, and all the evidence collaboratively has him fried, the touch DNA, etc. Yeah, Lynn, this is a strong case. I don't think he'll ever plead. He wants to see this through. Just think, what would incentivize him to plead? Even if they said, we'll take the death penalty off the table, it could be 20 years after appeals and everything. And then who knows what happened? Idaho might get rid of the death penalty. Remember a guy named Charles Manson and all his hoodlums that viciously, knifed a pregnant woman, Sharon Tate, and took her baby out, killed the LaBiancas, killed them. Look at Leslie Van Houten. Leslie Van Houten, facts. She testified that she stabbed, I believe, 16 times, mercilessly stabbed. She herself, she admits it, 16 times, the LaBiancas. What did the LaBiancas ever do? They're just sitting around their house. All of them got the death penalty. Then California changed their laws, rescinded the death penalty, so they all got life without a parole. Or maybe they did get the possibility of parole because she was paroled, but I think it even changed after life without parole and then life with the possibility of parole. She was resentenced, just like what they're doing with Menendez. Everybody forgets the victims. Now the LaBiancas, almost all their family is gone. There's nobody really to fight for them. And Leslie Van Houten got out. Even if you think she's rehabilitated and isn't going to hurt anybody anymore, what about the punishment, the lives she took? And heinous, they wrote on the walls with blood. They sat in there and ate their food. They mutilated the LaBiancas and mutilated the Tates and the Folgers. Horrible. So what does he have to lose? Who knows what the laws will be by then? I mean, he's not going to get convicted. And then if he gets sentenced, he's not going to be killed. I mean, even one of the quickest ones was Timothy McVeigh. And I think his was several years. He was responsible for the Oklahoma City bombing. He didn't fight anything. He said, take me. I did it. And it still took years because of all the people fighting. So he's going to wait, and then he's going to want to write books. He can't profit, but he can still be involved in writing them. He's going to want to tell his story, just like BTK did, like Bundy. He's going, because for him, look, if you can't be famous and do things right, it's easy to be infamous. You just kill somebody the way he did. All right. Everyone, thanks for being here. And I hope to have a show tomorrow night or the next night about the Menendez brothers. I appreciate you all so much. And until next time, may justice be served for the Idaho 4.